Hello! Hi everybody! Unorthodox video style today, like we're not going to be doing the face-to-face fun facts and intro. We're just gonna jump right into whatever this is because I'm anticipating a lot of talking and a long video. So what you are seeing before you right now are all of my cheek products. So all of my blushes, bronzers, highlights. Oh, I just realized my nails are chipped. Oh well, it be like that sometimes. I have just been thinking a lot recently about decluttering and minimizing and my life and what I want out of my life and the Konmari Method and just like a whole bunch of really like big weird philosophical things. And at the same time I've had this sort of burgeoning frustration with the amount of stuff in my makeup collection. In the process of moving earlier this summer, I found so much makeup that I had, quite frankly, just like forgotten I owned. And to me, that feels, not to seem harsh, but it feels disgusting. I should put a disclaimer right here. This is not to pass judgment that if you own more than what I own right now, I think you're like a gross person, because that's not what I'm saying at all. What I found disgusting was the fact that for me personally, I owned so much makeup and I cared so little about it that I had just like misplaced a bunch of stuff throughout my house, like in closets and bags and all of that kind of stuff. There was like a carelessness to the way that I treated my makeup and a sort of callousness in how I just forgot I owned so much of it. It belies a sort of blasé attitude towards makeup that I personally am not comfortable with for myself, because I want my relationship with my makeup to be intentional. I want to know every single thing I own. I want to love every single thing I own. I want to appreciate every single thing I own. I don't ever want to be in a state of my life again where I own so much makeup that I care so little about that I don't remember what I own and that I'm just like losing it all over the house. I want to be at a phase in my life where I'm like, oh, I love each piece of makeup I own enough that if I lost it or didn't have it, I'd be like, damn, that sucks. I actually really like that. And in order to get that way, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use the Konmari method. Now, I've been thinking a lot about like which methods to use, how to declutter and all of that kind of stuff recently. And I'm going to make a video very soon where I discuss why exactly it is that I trust the Konmari method and have so much faith in it. So that'll be a discussion for another time. For the purpose of this video, please just know that I will be using the Konmari method of decluttering all of my blushes, bronzers, and highlighters. And for the purposes of my no-buy year and for my ADHD, I will be decluttering all of these things into a box. I discuss why I'm doing that in much greater detail in a video that I'm going to link up in the cards, but I personally am ready for this collection to go down by a substantial amount. I'm ready to stop feeling frustrated every time I look at my makeup collection, because that is the overwhelming feeling I have been having for a couple of weeks now, because there's so much stuff that it's not fitting properly in my storage. And whenever I like go in to reach for stuff, there's so much junk that I'm at a loss for what exactly I should be reaching for. And that is not where I want to be. So without any further ado, let's get it. So this is it right here, and these are all of the highlighting items I own. Because the way the Konmari method works is you keep only the things which spark joy, and you thank and discard all of the rest. And the way you do that is by holding each item in your hand and asking, does this spark joy? For reference, the phrase spark joy that Marie Kondo uses is a translation of the Japanese phrase tokimeki, which more literally translates to like a heart flutter. So the idea is that when you hold a thing that sparks joy, you should feel some sort of physical reaction in your body. Now, Marie Kondo acknowledges that for the average person, we're so used to sort of tuning out which things bring us joy or not that it's really hard to figure out whether a thing sparks joy or not in the start. So one of the techniques she has when you're struggling is like, if you look at the stack in front of you, what is your absolute most favorite thing? Thing that you know you absolutely love and adore. And then she has you pick up that thing, hold it in your hands, and notice how your body feels. So for me, I know exactly what that is. It's this. This is the Nars highlighter in Fort de France. I have a very specific look that I like to achieve when I'm highlighting. I'm gonna see if I can insert some clips of it over here. I basically like for my entire cheek to be lit up as this sort of luminous, dewy glass skin look. And this highlight is the #1 thing that helps me achieve that. It's this very like weird thin consistency, and the highlighter always looks like it has hard pan, but it doesn't. And it's one of those like really odd highlights where the more you sort of buff it out with a brush on your cheeks, the more your skin looks increasingly wet and like glass. It's never made me look glittery. I'm very acne prone, but it's never emphasized any texture I've had on my cheeks. It's my favorite powder highlight that's able to give me both that glossy and glassy look to my skin. So this is a definite keep. Now, the next thing Marie Kondo sort of recommends if you're a person who sort of has trouble figuring out what sparks joy or what doesn't, is to actually kind of try and rank a bunch of items. So she's like, you know, if you have a really big stack of stuff, maybe pick out like 5 or 10 things and try to rank them from your favorite to least favorite. So we're gonna kind of use that philosophy and go forward. If this is my #1 ranked highlighter, my #2 would probably be, ooh, I think it's a toss-up between these two. But for now, I'm gonna say this one because I've been using this a lot during the summer. This is the Nudestix Nudies Hey Honey highlighter. It's this very beautiful, glossy gold stick highlighter. It melts just seamlessly into my skin. And it does this absolutely miraculous thing where usually when something remains like a little bit tacky or sticky on your skin in order to give you that glossy glass wet look, it simultaneously ends up feeling very like heavy and thick and sticky, and this doesn't do that. Even though I can feel a little bit of tack whenever I go and put my hands on my cheeks, it feels like there's nothing on there. It's truly weightless. And since I currently have short hair, the tack doesn't bother me at all. This is an easy #2. #3 would be this guy. This is the MAC Hyper Real Glow palette. They have a bunch of different versions of this now. This is the one that is in the golds. I would say that this formula is in between the Nars formula and a traditional highlighter. So traditional highlighters tend to be a little bit creamier feeling and a little more intensely pigmented and metallic. So these are a little creamier feeling than the Nars ones, and they are a little more intensely pigmented, but they're not like an Anastasia highlight. I really love that the palette gives you 3 different tones. For me, when it comes to performance, this MAC highlighting trio is basically the golder version of this Nars Fort de France. I rely on it a lot when I want to go slightly more gold or bronze with my highlights. So here's what's left. I think the next thing I kind of want to pick up is this. So this was something that I had forgotten that I owned, and then I found it like stuffed in the back of a closet when I was moving. This is the MAC Extra Dimension Skin Finish in the color Superb. I'm gonna tell you exactly why I bought this highlighter. I bought this highlighter because Mariah Leonard made me. Same deal with this guy, by the way. So this is a really, really interesting highlight. I don't know how it's quite catching in the pan, but it looks like this really weird silvery pink copper bronzy color. I know I just used so many adjectives as to render that description entirely useless, but it truly is a very like weird kind of a color. So it's a little bit actually darker than my skin. But again, this is one of those highlights that when I use my favorite technique of applying highlighter, which is using like a really big buffing brush like this to sort of sweep it in circular motions over my entire cheek and up onto my temple, this just sort of like melts seamlessly into my skin and disappears. It gives me like this very subtle rosy bronze glow. And Mariah Leonard had initially mentioned this in a video as one of her favorite highlighters to use that doesn't emphasize texture, and she was absolutely right. For me, because I'm a person who I don't wear highlight just on the tops of my cheekbones, I literally bring it down over the apples of my cheek. Emphasizing texture is a really big no-no for me, and each of these 3 highlighters does a very, very good job at giving me like beautiful, glassy, glowy cheeks without making me look like I have sandpaper cheeks. So of the stuff that we have left here, The next one that I want to pick up is this. This is the NYX Duochromatic highlighter in Snow Rose. So the reason why I want to pick this up is because of all of the highlights here, this is my only duochrome. And this, although it looks like purely white in the pan, it actually has like a very beautiful pink sheen to it once you buff it out. No idea if that's showing up in the light or not. If I had been filming favorites videos all throughout June, July, and August, this would 100% have made it in one of those favorites, because all throughout May, all throughout June, and throughout the vast majority of July, I use this particular highlighter as a topper for the vast majority of my pink blushes. I would like sweep a little bit of it on the sides, tap off the excess, and then I would literally just buff it onto my entire cheeks. Specifically, I would start on the apples of my cheeks and then I would buff up onto my temples so that this would layer on top of whatever pinkish mauve blush I was using. If you're interested in seeing what that looked like in action, I'm going to link my May favorites up in the cards. My cheek looks very like beautifully luminous, glowy, and pink, and it's due entirely to this product because the blush I was wearing was in fact a matte blush. This gives me like almost like a beautiful like oyster mother of pearl style pink sheen and glow, but there's absolutely no glitter in here at all, and so it doesn't emphasize any texture whatsoever on my skin. So she's definitely staying. Of the things that are left, I think the only two things I want to keep are these. So this one, I have a friend who recently sent me a package containing my Christmas/birthday present super duper early. And in addition to the actual gift, she put this little Jouer thing and a mini YSL lipstick in red. What is this called? These are the Jouer Whisper tints, I guess. One is in the shade Whisper, this one, and then this is in the shade Seashell. So she gave these to me because she herself actually doesn't really like using cream blushes or highlights, but I do. And I haven't really gotten a chance to play with these yet, but these seem intriguing. This one in particular, in order to give me that sort of very luminous, beautiful blush look that I like. So I think I'm gonna keep this one purely to test out, to see if I like the formula, to see if I like it more than these guys, etc., etc. So I'm gonna keep her to try out right now. So this was also a thing that a friend decluttered to me. So she had bought this because she had, a lot of her favorite YouTubers had hyped this up. This is the Ciate Dewy Stick in the shade Glow. So it's a cream stick highlight and it's almost entirely sheer. There's like a little bit of a silvery pearl in it, but it's very faint. Like it's not pigmented at all. I'm pretty sure you could put this on any skin tone and it would look just fine because the vast majority of the product is just this sort of very clear gloss. However, this doesn't really dry down. And my friend has long hair, and so every single time she would wear this highlighter, she'd be like, wow, this looks so beautiful, my cheek looks amazing, I look like a Glossier model, I'm living my best glossy life, and then her hair would get stuck to it. And she would get really frustrated and annoyed. I don't have that problem, and my friend knew that I always wanted to try this guy out, but that I didn't feel comfortable buying it. First of all, because I'm on a no-buy, but even before I was on a no-buy, because I already had this Nudestix Hey Honey stick, and I didn't want to buy like a second cream highlight in the fear that this one would go bad. So she gave this to me along with a couple other choice pieces of makeup because she just got into grad school and had to move away for it, and so she did like a mass declutter of all of her makeup. So I want to get to know this guy a little bit better until I can sort of figure out for myself which one I prefer. So these 7 items are the ones that are really like sparking joy or which intrigue me, which in itself is sort of a form of sparking joy. And there are these 3 remaining. And I can tell you sort of just by having done this ranking process that now that we've gotten to this stage, like I'm good. Looking at what's up here, I'm fine with just that. And it's not like these are bad highlighters. Like I'm gonna go through each 3 of these now just in case people are curious. And also because part of the Konmari process is letting go of things with gratitude for what they have done for you. So this little segment where I'm gonna go over each 3 of these highlights and sort of shower them with praise is my way of thanking them for the service that they have provided me. It is really fascinating that in the process, that as I sort of went through and started ranking everything, I sort of figured out what Kondo calls my own personal Joy line, because she talks a lot about how sometimes when you're sorting through things, there's nothing like actually egregious or bad. There's nothing that you really hate. However, certain things will spark more joy than other things. And if you start doing the sort of ranking process, you will begin to figure out where your own individualized joy line is. Your metaphorical line in the sand where it's like, okay, the products above this that spark above this much joy, I'm willing to keep. And all of this stuff below, it's not that it's like terrible, it's not that I hate it, but I just don't personally see it worth keeping given the stuff that was on the other side of that joy line. So I'm gonna move these guys up a little bit and discuss these three. So let's discuss this first. This is the Balm Mary Luminizer highlighter. I have kept this around for so long because this was the very first highlighter I bought. She's old, she's beat up. I don't know if this is like visible to see, but there's actually like a pretty significant dent in the middle of the highlight where I used to just always like dip in my brush. I've been keeping this mostly for reasons of sentimentality, because like, oh, it was the very first highlighter I bought and look at how pretty the packaging is. It was like a double whammy of nostalgia. First in terms of the packaging and aesthetic, and then second because this really was the first item in its category. And for that, I'm truly grateful and thankful. Miss Mary Luminizer, she served me so well for all of those years when she was the only highlighter I owned. However, like, I'm a different person now. The way that I highlight is different. The things that I look for in a highlight are different. And she no longer quite suits my taste. So I'm gonna let her go with gratitude and declutter her into a box. So next up is this Benefit What's Up highlighter. This is a very beautiful, like, silvery champagne color. This was the very first stick highlight I bought. This is much drier in texture than the other stick highlights. I actually think if you're a person who dislikes cream highlights because you think that they will be sticky or glossy or overly wet feeling, this is absolutely not like that. Even though this is in a stick format, it almost dries down into a powder. There's no stickiness, there's no tackiness, it's beautifully natural. Like, this is a lot more natural than the vast majority of powder highlights I have seen out there. I used it faithfully for a very, very long time. It's the thing that got me over my fear of cream and stick highlighters, and I'm genuinely so grateful to it. But it's a smidge too cool tone for what I like now. The color of this is just ever so slightly off on my skin, and the Nudestix Hey Honey, for example, meshes much better with my actual golden olive undertones. So I think with this one in particular, what I might do is I might give it to my older sister. My older sister is much fairer than me, and she has a slightly pinker undertone. Like, she's not quite sickly olivey green the way that I am. And she used to have the mini size of this highlighter, and she loved it to bits and pieces. So I'm gonna ask her if she wants it and has use for it, and perhaps pass it along to her. Lastly is this Pixi by Petra highlighter in Subtle Sunrise. So this is a highlight duo. The shade to the right is like a very beautiful rose gold. The shade to the left is this sort of very like icy champagne. Here's what I'm going to say about this highlighter. If you are intrigued by the Nars highlighting formula, this is actually, amongst all of the products here, probably the closest to the Nars formula in terms of consistency. This is a very thin highlight. It doesn't seem super creamy. You look at it and like the Nars highlight, you're like, is that hard pan? Like, what's going on? However, just like the Nars highlighter, if you actually take the time to buff this guy in with a brush, it's gonna give you like a bam, glassy result. This is actually capable of rendering a much more intense look. Like, if you've ever tried out that Nars formula and been like, oh, that's nice, but I want almost like a little bit extra oomph from my highlighter, this Pixi one is the way to go. It is a beautiful, ultra glassy highlight that can go from being like really, really subtle to really, really bam. This is genuinely like a very legit drugstore highlight. It's just like, I already have the Nars one. So as beautiful as this is, and as much as I've like held on to it because I'm like, wow, like a drugstore really did that, like they really mimicked that Nars formula so beautifully, I personally don't need this. And so I will let go of this with gratitude. So in the final accounting of highlights, these 7 are staying and these 3 are going. Scream. Okay, I spent so long on the highlights. Maybe I'll break this up into 2 videos. So we'll do highlights and bronzers, and then blushes, of which I have a gajillion, will perhaps be another video. So with the bronzers, what I've done is I've taken the liberty of sort of swatching them on the back of my hands. I hope it's a little bit visible to see. So at the top, this one that's sort of shimmery, that's the Charlotte Tilbury Filmstar Bronze and Glow. So this is the shade Medium Deep. There used to be like a highlighter in here that was way too dark for my skin and oddly really glittery. However, this palette's like really old. I'm hoping the camera is able to capture that it's like quite beat up looking because I've had this for a very long time. And about a year ago, I accidentally dropped this palette and the highlight bit just completely shattered. Of all of the ones swatched on my hands, you might be able to see that this is the one really shimmery bronzer. These other 2 are matte. So this one is the Bahama Mama bronzer. It's the second one down. Hopefully in this lighting you're able to tell that it is actually the coolest and grayest toned of all of the bronzers. And then lastly we have this MAC bronzer from a collection, I don't know, last year, maybe 2 years ago, I can't remember. But this is the shade Baiana Bronze. And that's this matte bronzer way down here. If you were to ask me to pick my absolute favorite, it's gonna be this one without question. I find that it's a very flattering shade of a bronzer on me. I can somehow use it to both contour my jawline and warm up my face, and it looks really good in both functions. Like, if I could only keep one, this would be the one. So that leaves these 2. I'm gonna tell you right here, right now, that I'm going to keep this Charlotte Tilbury Filmstar Bronze and Glow. I would literally never recommend this product to anyone. It is exorbitantly priced. I was having an absolute moment of insanity when I bought this. I know that for a fact because I bought this in the absolute depths of my depression as some like twisted form of retail therapy self-care. And like, this really is not that good. That highlight was horrible. And you know how I know it was horrible? Because when I ended up dropping this palette about a year ago and the highlight side fully shattered, the most overwhelming feeling I felt was relief at not having to try and use this up. Because like, I really was not getting anything out of the highlighter side of this. The bronzer side of this, on the other hand, I have been using diligently. There's actually a substantial dent in the bronzer. And although I would never recommend this product to anybody, nor would I ever in my life repurchase it, I do feel like a certain amount of joy in how much I've used it up, and in the idea that if I continue diligently using this up, I will finish it all the way. There is a sense of joy there about that. Moreover, I find great utility in this actual compact because this is one of the few compacts I have that has a mirror that's big enough for me to actually do my makeup in when I'm traveling. And I sometimes use this empty side to like pour out a little bit of loose powder because it's much easier to sort of pick up the loose powder from here with my brush than it is from like the container that holds the Ben Nye banana powder, or even like my mini size of that Laura Mercier translucent powder. So this case gives me a lot of utility. The fact that I've almost used up this bronzer, I feel like a big sense of pride around that. Like when I ultimately hit pan and finish this, I know I'm going to feel just like so intensely satisfied. And it's actually like not a bad bronzer. It's nowhere near worth its price tag. Like I have no illusions about thinking that this bronzer, the way that it looks, is worth the cost that it was. Like, I can definitely get this result from a lot of other products for a lot cheaper, but I do enjoy using it, and I think even after this bronzer runs out, I may still end up keeping the compact, which is like metal and hefty and has lasted me all of these years. So these 2 bronzers are going to stay, and that leaves this one as my least favorite bronzer. Funnily enough, this was my first bronzer. I bought this and the Mary Luminizer together. They were my very first contouring and highlighting set. And I think, hopefully now that I've opened this up, you guys are able to see that it really is the coolest and grayest tone of all 3 of these bronzers, and it's also the darkest of all 3 of these bronzers. And that was the reason why I had bought it in the first place, because at the time when I made this purchase, it was really difficult to find bronzers that were dark enough for my skin tone. Bahama Mama by the Balm was one of the few that actually showed up on my skin as a bronzer and not as like a finishing powder. I think this was my only bronzer for a little bit over a year before I went out and I bought this and started using this almost exclusively. And so in that time I did get a substantial amount of use out of it. However, I have just come to realize that this is a little bit too cool toned for my particular liking. I don't do a hardcore contour. I don't really contour my nose. Like 9 days out of 10, I even forget to contour my cheeks. Most of the time, I'm only really contouring my jawline. And then if I do use bronzer or whatever, it's to add like a little bit of warmth back into my face because my foundation is like a little bit too light or something like that. And this, against my skin tone, is purely just a contour powder. It really doesn't function to warm me up at all. And so I think it's time for me to just sort of let this go. So I'm gonna keep these two and let this guy go. Hi, hello, it's Editing Prachi here. I can't find my tripod right now to set this up so that my face is visible. Also, it's 6:30 in the morning, so you can instead have the intense and immense pleasure of looking at my dear friend, Halowine Chow. This was what my friend who sent me that little Jouer duo actually got me for Christmas / my birthday. Anyway, my friend Chow and I have decided that just doing the highlighter and bronzer section of this video, it was quite long enough, and that this is in fact an appropriate, if somewhat abrupt, ending for this part 1 of the video. The editing for the blush section is pretty straightforward, and I'm actually more than halfway done, so please look for that video as well as my full concluding remarks tomorrow or Saturday at the latest. Chow and I would like to thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And even if the rest of your week ends up becoming messy or imperfect, I hope that you're still able to create and experience some truly beautiful moments. Thanks for watching. Bye.